This is working. But this one isn't. I gotta get closer. Alright. Yeah, I checked where it plugged in. I checked that to make sure it wasn't loose. Unplug it and plug it back in, maybe it'll reset it. Well, it just plugs into the rest of those. No, I just meant into the back of that unit itself. Yeah. Okay. All right, you just need to take a peek up here first before we get going. This is tire. Just above it is siding. It's going to be important because he is going to... Okay, I can try it. Still nothing. I put a new battery. I'll change the battery again. I got another one. Or maybe that was loose. Nope, it's not loose. Okay. As we travel with Jesus today, he's going to take quite a hike. I want you to see that just from Tyre here till he comes across and heads south, that's about 50 miles. So he's going to walk 50 miles here, and pretty much as he comes back up and around, he's going to hit another 50. So he's going to be taking us on a journey of about 100 miles or so. Not to mention the fact, hey, look at that, it worked. Okay, press the, oh, there you go, you got to go back. Nano's working it all by himself. All right. So he's going to, first of all, leave. We're going to, as we start our day, we're going to start in Capernaum. He is going to teach a lesson. Then he's going to leave Capernaum, which is right up here, and he's going to head up over here to Tyre and Sidon, where he's going to perform a miracle. He's going to come all the way around here just so he can perform another miracle. And then he's going to travel up a little bit around here so he could feed 4,000 people. Then they're going to head back just so he could bawl out his disciples about what he just did. So it's a long journey. They're going to be with him. You can imagine if you had the opportunity to travel about, I would say it's going to be pretty close to 150 miles. Now, when you walk with somebody for 150 miles, you probably get to know them pretty good. So that's quite a walk. Roughly, we're going to be walking to San Diego and halfway back. Okay? So that would consume some time. I suppose if we was to walk to San Diego and back, we'd probably find a lot of stuff to talk about. Now, notice we know nothing about what happened on that road there. Remember, we only know 52 days. How many days did it take them to walk? We don't know. We're not told. All we know is they leave Capernaum. Boom! The next thing that takes place is in Tyre and Sidon. And then we see one little glimpse. He's there for how, I'm supposing he must have been there for more than a day. You're not going to walk 50 miles just to run into one person. Maybe he did. Wouldn't that be something? We always say how important we are. If I was the only one, he'd still die for me on the cross, is the claim that Christianity makes, right? So who's to say he didn't? But I'm thinking there's probably a lot more. That's a pretty big town. There's probably a lot that he could do there. Once Christianity takes root, it's going to be up in that region that it really takes off, and not so much down in Jerusalem, where it stagnates among the Jews. So it could be. One of the interesting things that I note, though, is, you see, here is Nain. Remember where he healed the nobleman's son? But this is on a hillside. See, there's this mountain right here, right? You know what this area is? That's the Valley of Megiddo. Armageddon, we talked about it this morning. This is the valley where Armageddon takes place. And notice, he overlooks it from Nazareth and from Nain. Whenever he travels south, he passes through the Valley of Megiddo. I wonder how often he stops and says, someday I'm riding back. I wonder how often he, in his mind, because he could see the whole thing, and I wonder how often he must stop and pray there, Lord, what's going to happen here is terrible. Even on this peaceful day as he's walking with his disciples. So his life is one of a lot of movement. I would have just waited and had everybody come to me. He didn't, though. He is going to take off and meet with them. But as we begin now, we're at his home here in Capernaum. There's a reference that's going to be made and says when they entered into the house. I think the house is his house. Remember, he moved from Nazareth and got himself a home here in Capernaum. And that's his headquarters. That's his base. Remember, when he came home, he always comes home and there's a whole street full of people waiting for him. That's where he's at, right there in Capernaum. Now remember, we just fed those 5,000 people last week. It was a pretty busy week for the Lord. To keep this all together for you, I want you to go to Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7. What we're doing is we're combining Mark chapter 7 and Matthew chapter 15 at this time. But it's kind of hard to read two things at one time. So if you would, go to Mark chapter 7, and you're going to be right there at verse 1. Let me have the next picture. No? Okay, this one's important. I want you to notice what these guys are doing. They're eating. They're eating with their hands. They're walking through a grain field. Guess what you can't do before you eat when you're walking through a grain field? You can't wash your hands first. This simple act is going to require that Jesus is going to spend almost all of Matthew chapter 15 and Mark chapter 7. He spends that whole chapter talking about this one incident that's about to take place. So if you would, go to Mark chapter 1. Now when the Pharisees gathered together to him, and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem. The smartest people live in Jerusalem. Now remember, this is the year of disclosure. We're already been through the year of opposition, and the opposition hasn't stopped. They're looking for ways to stop Jesus Christ. That's man's whole intent, to limit or stop him. And how are they going to? They're going to attack what he is doing or saying. But I want you to notice the subtle way. They don't come out and directly attack him. Very rarely is it ever done that way. They're going to come through the back door and hope he doesn't notice that they're attacking him. But of course, he's going to notice. And when the Pharisees gathered together to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, they saw that some of his disciples ate with hands defiled. Oh, Lord! Their hands were unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat. Now, Mark and Matthew both are going to go back and give us a little bit of history lesson, because us Gentiles, we don't eat with washed hands anyway. These guys were eating like Gentiles. And wow! For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands several times. Several times. Observing the traditions of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat. Now this doesn't sound foreign to us, because when we go to the marketplace and we buy grapes, we wash them because of all the pesticides now that are put on everything. We wash our food. We get the lettuce and we shake it and rinse it out before we put it on our hamburger. We get the carrots and whatever we're going to eat. We wash everything first. See, we're good Pharisees, right? But these guys, and here's what they're getting at, but they did this in a ceremonious way. They would wash their hands before they touched this, and going from this to this, they would wash their hands over and over and over. It sounds like good hygiene to us. But not the way that they're doing it. Because it wasn't really cleaning. They would sort of just dip their fingers in. Little finger bowl type stuff. Okay, I'm clean now. Like, okay. Unless they went to the marketplace, they didn't eat unless they purified themselves. They'd take a shower coming back from the market. There were many other traditions that they deserved. The washing of cups and pots and vessels of bronze. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him. Now notice, here's what they're going to say to him. Get this sentence. Why do your disciples not live according to the traditions of the elders, but eat with hands defiled? Good master, good rabbi, good teacher. Why do your lousy disciples not follow the traditions? See what they're saying? Why haven't you taught them? Oh, Jesus, he ain't even going to catch it. He's not going to catch on at all, is he? That's such a clever way of getting him. See how smart? That's why they brought the scribes up from Jerusalem, to find a way to trap him. So they don't ask him, why didn't you teach your disciples? They say, why don't your disciples do this? Well, of course, a disciple's not going to do anything that a master hasn't taught him, right? They thought they got him. Oh, no, you got me on one. I have broken the scriptures. No, it's not even a scriptural thing that they're talking about here. This, and Jesus is going to make it very plain, is a tradition of men. Notice what he says here. And I want you to notice he's sometimes a little on the unkind side. And he said unto them, well, sounds like Ronald Reagan. I bet that's where you got that. Well, did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites? Wow, you can't talk like that today. You can't say to people, you hypocrite. See how, Jesus, the meek and mild, the lowliest of the lowly. Look at how he talks to people. And he's only going to get worse as the day goes on. Wait till he sees that Syrophoenician woman. And he begins to say to these people, see, sometimes people want to make it sound like Jesus never did anything offensive. Oh, you call people hypocrites and that's not offensive? Well did Isaiah speak of you hypocrites. As is written, this people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the precepts of men. You leave the commandments of God. You hold fast to the traditions of men. And he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandments of God in order to keep your traditions. You don't keep God's word, you keep yours. Men like to keep their words. They're not at all interested in keeping God's. But Jesus Christ here is wanting them to know that you ought to be keeping God's commandments. You have a fine way of rejecting the commandments of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother. And he who speaks evil of father or mother, let him surely die. I used to teach this to my children all the time. But you say, if a man tells his father or a mother, what you would have gained from me is Corban, that is, given to God. Now, in the King James it says it's a gift. Now, here's the thing. Here I am in my old age, and I come to Nathaniel, who is a young and prosperous young man. And I say, son, Mom and I have no food to eat. You think you can buy us some groceries? And Nathaniel says, well, I'd love to. But see, I've dedicated all my money to the Lord. That doesn't mean Nathaniel doesn't get to spend his own money. It means that, Lord, here's my money. All of the money that you want, you go ahead and you take it. And when Jesus doesn't take all that money, he says, thank you, I'll spend the rest. But I gave it to you first. So now, because I gave this money to God and he didn't take it, I can't give it to you, Dad. It's a gift. It's something that I gave to God. How can I possibly take it back from God now and give it to you? However, I do get to go buy myself that new car because I gave it to God. This is a way that they learn to get around. This is what Jesus catches them on right here. It's easy to say, I would love to help you, but all I have left is Corban. It means things that I have given to God. They're gifts that I gave to God. He gave them back to me. So it's something that God and I are sharing. I can't share it with you. It would be wrong of me to do that. Because this is God's stuff. You see how wicked these men were? And Jesus caught them. You think you're going to be tricking him by saying, why do your disciples? He nails them flat out. You say it's Corban. You say it's a gift between me and God. You lousy buzzards. And so he went on with them and, through their traditions. And he goes on to say, verse 12, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God through your tradition, which you hand on, and many such things you do. You're ruining people by teaching them to be greedy. That's what they're doing. They're teaching their people how to be greedy, how to keep what you've got. And he called the people to them, and he said, hear me, all of you, and understand, there is nothing outside of a man which by going into him can defile him, but the things which come out of a man, they can defile him. Verse 17. And when he entered the house and left the people, his disciples said to him, would you teach us this parable? Go ahead and next picture. All right, here's Jesus begins to speak to them on that very thing. All right, and he says to them, then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatsoever goes into a man from the outside cannot defile him, since it enters not the heart, but his stomach, and it's passed on? Thus he declared all food clean. And he said, what comes out of a man is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, fornication, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these things come out from the man. See, that's the problem. It's not what we eat, it's our heart. It's what we think, what we feel. We always get in trouble because what do we go by first? We always go by, I feel. I hear people say it all the time. Well, I feel. What feeling? Problem with feelings, they're just little nerve endings and they're faked out so quick and so easy. Don't go by what you feel. Don't even go by what you see. You have to go by what you know. What do I know? I know that he loved me. I know that he gave himself for me. I know that he said that he would never leave me or forsake me. I know those things. I know that he said, my Father's thoughts for you are good thoughts. I'm resting comfortable in all of that. Because my day-to-day, the world around me changes way too much. And I believe it's about to change drastically pretty quick. And when it does, and it shakes the foundation of everything you stand on, you better be standing on this. You better hold on to that. So that's defilement. Not what comes in as far as food goes, but what comes out. That's the real nasty stuff. Pride, envy, jealousy. And he lists them all out there. Everything, all the bad stuff that you are starts in your heart. You can go to churches and they're so worried about the outside of somebody, but nobody ever inspects the inside. We just sort of let that go, right? And Jesus, of course, called us on that one today. Going down to verse 24 now, the very next one. All of a sudden, and from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon and entered a house. Leaves his house. Next one, please. He goes to Tyre. This woman wants his attention. He enters into a house. He's not going to give it to her. You think he was mean when he said to the Pharisees, you hypocrites? I use this one so often because sometimes Jesus seems like to us he doesn't care. Now I want you to notice he left Capernaum. He's up here in a Gentile area. This is not a Jewish community at all. This is a Gentile world. This woman is a Greek Syrophoenician. She speaks Greek, but she is, they're up here in the Phoenician area and Syria. She's a combination of a lot of people. She's a pagan. It tells us the language that she spoke, the religion that she served, and the region she is born from. She was a Greek Syro-Phoenician. Nothing to do with Christianity. Nothing to do with Judaism. But she heard about Jesus. His fame had spread abroad. This is, after all, the second time he's been here. Remember, he went here before, and on his way back, he had the teaching on the plain. This is the second time. So somebody remembered him from the last time he was there. And this is the second time now through this area. And while he is here, this woman hears about it. He arose and he went to the region of Tyre and Sidon and entered a house and would not have anybody know it. Hey, I'm tired. I want to take a nap. Don't let anybody know that I'm here. All right. Yet he could not be hid. You know, the odd thing is, in this house he couldn't be hid, but how often do Christians try to hide the fact that they are Christians? They try to hide Christ in them. Don't want anybody to know. Don't want the world to find out. I've had a difficulty myself keeping him hidden. He is found out. He entered the house. He didn't want anybody to know it. Yet he could not be hid. But immediately a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an unclean spirit heard of him. And she came and she fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth. And she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, and it's written in red so you know it's his words, in verse 27, let the children first be fed, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. My child is possessed. You know, like those Pharisees in the last section. He sounds a lot like them here, doesn't he? He sounds as cruel as they were. Well, I must first feed all the Jews. Lord, there ain't even no Jews in this area. You're in a non-Jewish area. I mean, I could see, well, that's because I got to get back to Jerusalem. Listen, all of Israel hasn't heard yet. All the Jews have not come to me yet. When all the Jews have finally heard and all the Jews are fed, then I'll come back and take care of your daughter. Hey, that's a pretty good promise. All right, I'll wait. No, she wouldn't. She's a mama. Mamas want what mamas want for their children, and they want it now. So, this woman begs him to heal her daughter, and he says, I can't give the Jews food to the dogs. Wow. That's what the Jews thought of all these. This is what they thought of you. This is probably what they still think of you. You're dogs. He uses the words of the Pharisees. They really must have ticked him off because he's still holding them in his mind, and he uses their words as he's traveling now, in contrast to his own. Look at the test. Remember what we said this morning, what we said last week? Jesus said this to test them, knowing himself what he was going to do. Jesus knew before he ever got there. He went to this area. He went to the region of Tyre and Sidon to heal that child. And yet when the mother comes and says, Lord, would you heal my daughter? I can't feed the dogs. Wow! You would think she had jumped, but listen, that's her only hope. What faith she must have had to know he didn't mean that mean thing he just said. How often when you pray is God mean to you? And you think he means it, don't you? And you get mad at him. You ain't a Greek Syrophoenician woman, I'll tell you that. Because she stuck it out. And she says what Jesus wants to hear. He throws that at her. And she says, yes, Lord. It's true. But, she throws us in there. But, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. He's in his house, probably sitting at table. How often when our dogs will come in the house, they're not allowed in the house while I'm eating, but after we're done, they'll come out and you'll see them lick up under the table. Any little crumbs that are there. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall under the table. Listen, don't stop your ministry. Don't quit doing what you're doing. Don't steal from them, but let me have the crumbs. Let me have the crumbs. Because his crumbs will take care of whatever you need. The smallest, if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, if you have little faith, if God could just do a little, his little is more than you will ever need. This guy who owns a cattle on 1,000 hills and the wealth in every mine, his little would be more sufficient to take care of you forever. And she got it. Why does this woman get something that the disciples who are walking with him for 150 miles don't get? That's true. But even the dogs eat of the crumbs from the children's tables. Everybody knows that. Look at his words to her now, verse 29. For this saying, because you said that, for this saying, you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter. What I say to you this morning, there's no big battle between God and evil. It isn't like Jesus has to go over and wrestle that demon out of anybody. He didn't even go there. He simply said to the woman, because you said what you just said, that the dogs eat the children's crumbs, because you said that, that demon just now left your daughter. Go on home. Go on home. What power, what control this man has, who's walking a dirty road, who may have well done, because this is all we know about that entire journey he just took. He went from Capernaum clear up to Tyre, and the only incident we're told about is this one. You think this is all he did? Maybe. Maybe he went all that way out of his way for this one woman. Or maybe she was the only one who asked. Maybe when he said that to somebody else, they said, okay. And they went home and didn't get what they needed. A lot of people quit. A lot of people give up just before they're about to receive. This woman didn't. And she went home, verse 30. The disciple records this for us. And she went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. Just as he said. Hey, Lord, how about just some crumbs? You know he turned around and smiled at her when he said that. How mean it looked when he said, I can't give the children's food to the dogs. You cannot deny that that sounds cruel. That sounds as bad as you hypocrites, you dogs. All right. Just because you said that, you got it. You got it. How easy was that? She begged. We're told she begged. He turned her down, but she didn't stop. And that's the secret to prayer. Now, we're told in verse 31, he returned from the region of Tyre and Sidon and went through to the Sea of Galilee. He left Sidon, and he went through. Remember that big picture we drew where he looped all the way around and then came back down to go to the Sea of Galilee because he's got to meet somebody else. Long journey. This is a long, long, long walk. If I was him, I would invent the bus or something. I would take the Greyhound and leave the driving to us. I suppose there's some sort of a caravan maybe. But we always see the picture of him walking. However he did it, he got here. And he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, and through the region of Decapolis. Decapolis, give me the next picture, Nano. Decapolis, no, go back one. There you go. This is one we're going to need right here. Decapolis, it means 10 cities. Deca, Greek for 10. Okay. Opolis, Greek word for city. The region of the 10 cities. These are 10 Greek cities. Again, notice he's not with the Jews. He left Capernaum, the home with the Jews, and he went, and now he's dealing with Gentiles. Dealing with Gentiles. Greek Syrophoenician woman. Now he comes down to Decapolis. He meets with a Greek man who happens to be deaf and dumb. He's mute, can't speak, can't talk. Almost always when you can't hear, you can't talk, or at least you can't talk clearly. You ever talk to a deaf person, you know right away because you listen to them talk. And you could tell by their enunciation that if they even try, if they even got any kind of speaking skills, it's going to be really, really rough. And so he comes down now to meet this man. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. And they besought him to lay his hands on him. And taking him aside from the multitude privately. Probably because this, this poor guy is thrust out here and he's probably not comfortable talking in front of people. He can't hear what people are saying, so for all he knows, they could be mocking him. So Jesus is very discreet here and takes the man aside. He puts his fingers in his ear. Wow. And then he spits and touches his tongue. Okay. And then he looks up to heaven. And he sighs. I like that, the fact that he just had to exhale there. And he said to him, Ephrathah, be opened. And his ears were opened, and his tongue was released. Jesus got his finger in a man's ear. Put your finger in your ear and talk. You'll hear that you can hear yourself, right? And then he spits and puts it on the man's tongue. If I go to the doctor and the first thing he does is stick his finger in my ear and spit on his finger, and I'm not going to let him touch my tongue. I'm sorry, it ain't going that far. Right? How much faith did this man have in that man that he let him stick his finger in his ear? You give people a wet willy, you sit there and you go like this.